Welcome to the School of Christian Mysticism, Meditation and Contemplative Prayer Support Group. This is something that happens once a month. And this month we are going to talk about the use of body and posture in contemplative prayer or in meditation. And by way of introduction, just from my early practice, my early endeavors into beginning to understand what contemplative prayer is, or even hearing about it, I remember a couple of influences in my reading. One being Metropolitan Anthony, who wrote a book about the Jesus Prayer. And this was really the first time I'd read about contemplative prayer knowingly, though Thomas à Kempis had spoken deeply to me as a young teenager. As I didn't really know why. Metropolitan Anthony began to put this into words for me as he spoke about the practice of the Jesus Prayer. But his approach was very much a sitting or kneeling meditation. I think probably what captured my imagination through his practice was the moment when he described how when we are deeply praying, it doesn't matter if the house burns down around us, we won't even notice. If there's an earthquake, I think he's exaggerating. But this is, that spoke deeply to me. But then the other one was more to do with posture, and this was Jürgen Moltmann, the German theologian. I was pretty into theology in those days, so it's pretty much only theologians I came into contact with. But he spoke about 3 postures in prayer, and he put them in order, really. But he spoke about prostrating ourselves, like on a Muslim mat, for example. And he talked about how that gives reverence to God, puts us in a posture of absolute reverence down there on the floor. And then he spoke about kneeling or sitting with hands like this or not. This is more open, more giving of our attention, less worship perhaps, though still worshipful. In fact, all the postures he suggests are worshipful. But it's a certain restraint in the prayer as we sit like this or we kneel like this, still showing reverence. And then he speaks about opening the hands and looking up to heaven perhaps, or looking out anyway. And he talks about the joy in this posture and the complete openness to what's coming from God. When I first met Joe, the first time I met you, I was interviewing you, wasn't I? About your prayer practice, and particularly your Sufi prayer practice. But then we had a retreat together, and during that retreat, you led us in a number of postures. Can you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, Tim. I think that the practice which that you're referring to there was the practice of kneeling, and then different postures from there. So kneeling forward, bowing forward with the head to the floor, and saying eleison or thinking eleison, and entering into the suffering of Christ, and then coming up to the sitting position while kneeling, and saying Alleluia, that all is not suffering, and then raising the hands, as you say, and saying Sanctus, that all is at the end of it union and holy. And I think that I think I remember you finding that very powerful at the time, and there is something very powerful for me about bowing and about all different postures, and something very powerful about bringing the body to prayer, and bringing the head lower than the heart. I think that's both symbolic and actual, that we are submitting ourselves. There's something really powerful about bringing the forehead to the ground. And well, that's some initial thoughts. So anyway, something about that practice that we shared that day.
Thank you, Joe. And Malcolm, when we began to talk about this topic, you mentioned that, you don't see any reason why we should have to wave our hands in the air or anything like this about prayer. What have you experienced or not experienced about?
Well, I begin by saying that obviously it's a very meaningful thing to some people or many people, and I respect that. And I used to be very, very concerned about posture during prayer, which was an influence of Zen Buddhism, I think, where the Zen master would say, posture is everything. To sit up properly straight, and I used to use a little stool and all of that sort of thing, and be very careful about posture. But I came to feel that focusing on that just for sort of half an hour twice a day wasn't taking it into my life in general. And how to take it into life in general was also a Buddhist influence, actually. It was the notion that just your everyday activities can become prayer. I mean, you mentioned Thomas à Kempis, and that's, the practice of the presence of God. In morning prayer this morning, I was reminded of Thich Nhat Hanh's, what he says about eating a piece of bread, as we do in communion, that the whole cosmos is in that bread. The sunshine is in the bread, the rain that falls to nourish the wheat is in the bread. Everything in the cosmos is represented in that bread. It's the body of the cosmos. And I learned from the Buddhists to carry that into daily life, really. Eating breakfast can become a sacrament in that way. I can eat a bowl of porridge, and it doesn't always happen, but when I'm orientated properly, then you think in the same way about the oats and about the fruit that's on the porridge and the nuts that are on the porridge. And eating breakfast becomes a sacramental prayer in that kind of a way. And it's become important to me to see prayer as being part of daily life and not separate sort of procedure. And partly set against that is that I find it actually when people want to do body prayer, as they might call it, arm movements together with the Lord's Prayer, for example, which is something that people do where I go sometimes. I actually get nothing extra out of that beyond the Lord's Prayer itself. In fact, if anything, it rather detracts from it. And that's partly an ego-based thing. I realise that because I feel a bit embarrassed doing some of these things. And perhaps I should sort of give up the embarrassment and just do it. I tend to kind of slink to the back of the room a bit. Because you feel under some pressure to join in when people are doing things like that. And it's not always emphasised by whoever's leading it that you're free to do it or not to do it. So there is that element to it as well, but quite strongly lately, as I say, it's the wish to bring prayer into normal daily activities, just walking down to the shops. As I say, eating a meal. Yeah, that's it really.
That's interesting. And being conscious of what we're eating and looking at it, I guess, and tasting it and slowly chewing it, or walking and being conscious. There is a certain amount of posture, I think, possibly in that consciousness, a slouching, kind of laying back like that and eating. I'm not sure that I would be very conscious of what I'm eating. So maybe it comes into our practice, even if we're not deciding, right, I must concentrate on my posture now. Or Thich Nhat Hanh speaks about walking meditation as well, doesn't he? How we are conscious as we touch the ground, we're kissing the ground with our feet and loving the ground, and the ground is loving us back. And then this becomes kind of bodily, I suppose. I find Tai Chi and Qigong very helpful for my spirituality generally, even though I might practice it in certain sections or at certain times, like first thing in the morning, for example, in the same way as I might sit in sitting meditation or contemplative prayer and may have some mind to posture. But they don't become the whole thing. And for me, they like, if we train our body works better. And so life is enhanced. For me, the same thing happens with bringing my prayer life into every aspect of life. If I do take some moments to actually train and be conscious, for example, in Tai Chi, that the flow of energy is flowing through me. Well, I can focus on the flow of God's grace just as much as the chi, for example. So yeah, if everything is sectioned off, I absolutely agree with you, Malcolm, that it becomes then a separation. But is it possible for it just to be part of the same? Yeah.
Yes, I'm having a real sense of the temple of our body, our whole self, really, and how beautiful and sacred that is, and a real sense of awe of kind of that we're walking around, sitting around, whatever we're doing in this amazing temple. And that there is this continuum, isn't there, between the continuous mindful practice that you mentioned, Malcolm, and ideally throughout one's life and each activity, and a more limited time period of within a meditation practice, which helps me certainly to extend that then into life. It brings consciousness to brings more consciousness and mindfulness into everyday life.
I can very fully understand that in terms of meditation or contemplative prayer, the regular sort of more formal practice of that actually helps to bring it into daily life, because without doing that in a regular sort of way, you lose touch, or I do. But I can't, for me, I mean, we're all different. For me, trying to do that with movement doesn't add anything for me. I actually went on a weekend retreat with a Tai Chi teacher, trying to see what I was missing, really. And I just didn't get there somehow. And my daughter bought me a book on Qigong, which she obviously thinks I'm missing something. but I don't know what she sees, but I can't seem to get into those kind of practices. And I don't feel that I need to force myself. It either comes or it doesn't. And for some people, it's hugely fruitful, as it obviously is for the two of you. And for others, it isn't necessarily so. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, as Monty Python might say, we're all individuals, aren't we? We are all individuals, and we're different in our approach. We've spent 20 minutes now talking, and that's what we said we would do. And then we're going to stop recording, and we have a discussion now among those that are with us today. And if you are watching this video and you would like to join us to live once a month or even every Monday for contemplative prayer, or in the mornings every day for morning prayer, then just get in touch with us through the website, and you'll be very welcome to join us and speak with us. Joe, it might be nice if you give us one practice before we stop the recording. Would you do that?
Yes. Just briefly, we can use the Kyrie, which is we're maybe familiar with from church, and Kyrie eleison, Kyrie Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. It's just with a small bow from sitting position, just like this, so we can say Kyrie eleison,
eleison,
Christe eleison,
eleison,
Kyrie
Kyrie
eleison, Christe
Christe
eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison.